Welcome back. Under the latest version of President Trump's budget bill, more than 2 million acres of federally controlled land in western states would be sold off and redeveloped for various purposes, including housing and other infrastructure. The land would be drawn from roughly 258 million acres of land eligible for sale, according to the nonprofit conservation organization, the Wilderness Society. That's more than half of the total number of acres managed by the U.S. Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service. My next guest is an environmentalist who's strongly opposed to this land sale. Benji Backer is the founder and CEO of the group Nature is Nonpartisan. Benji, thank you for being here. This is being pushed primarily by Senator Mike Lee of Utah, and he's defended it in part by saying, quote, "The Senate bill does not authorize the sale of national parks, monuments, or wilderness. It identifies unused garden variety federal parcels for potential disposal, nothing more." What's your response?
Well, look, Teddy Roosevelt is rolling over in his grave, but the American people aren't rolling over here in America today. We have millions of Americans standing up and saying this is not okay across the political spectrum. This is not even just an 80-20 issue. Just 10% of Americans support the sale of this public land. And the thing that Mike Lee and others who support this measure don't understand is that just because something isn't a national park or a national wilderness area doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve to be in public hands. Some of my favorite moments in my life, and so many hunters and fishermen and women and hikers and skiers in their lives have been spent in U.S. Forest Service land and Bureau of Land Management land. That is the land that is up for sale. It is not just national parks that people recreate in and appreciate. Public lands were meant for public hands. Public lands were meant for public recreation and public consumption and time outdoors to make memories and connect with the land. That would be taken away with this proposal. It's absurd, but I'm also really glad to see that Republicans and Democrats together around the country are standing up. Some of the most far right, far left people all standing together to say this isn't okay. And it's time for the Senate to strike this provision from the bill and help Donald Trump also, because Donald Trump's legacy will not be good on conservation if this goes through.
You're a self-proclaimed conservative, and you say you're a conservationist as well. But why have this fight? Is the concern that if you let this little bit go, a lot more of it could go later?
Well, 3 million acres is a whole lot of land. And you know, I hate that we bring it down to numbers. You know, the environment isn't about numbers. You can't get this acreage back. You can't get nature back. The environment doesn't come back once you develop it. That is the sole purpose of this bill. This provision in the bill, by the way, is to solely develop it. If it was to transfer it to state ownership to manage the lands better or something like that, I think the American people could get behind that. But this is about ownership of private developers going in and developing more homes and more apartments and more businesses. And that's not something that the American people want. The most conservative thing in the world is to conserve. And the American legacy is largely around our conservation legacy, our beauty. People come across the world to see America's natural beauty. 3 million acres and turning that into bulldozing that for homes is not an American thing to do. And it also is a very slippery slope, like you were alluding to further action. But it also, again, it's not about percentages. These are 3 million acres of beautiful public land that we'd be taking advantage of and really destroying forever. You don't get that back. You don't get nature back. America has a legacy on conservation that it should uphold.
Real quick, the proponents of this also argue this helps address the housing crisis, especially in parts of the West where land's getting expensive, parts of Idaho, parts of Colorado, Arizona, the other states that are up for this. If not this, in providing this land for potential housing development, how would you propose addressing or coming up with solutions to address housing shortages?
Well, it's a pretty unanimous understanding that this is a real problem, right? Affordability and housing is a real problem, and the West is largely owned by the federal government in many states. But the answer is not a mass sell-off of our public land, especially some of the beautiful areas that you're seeing on the screen, which are up for sale in this proposal. It would be to help zone. It'd be for the cities and the counties to zone better, to permit better. If you look at all the studies done by universities and leading institutions, it's not that we need more space and more urban sprawl. It's that we need to actually make use of the space that we currently have, that it's not being permitted and not getting zoned for development, instead of going into nature any further. We have an obligation as humans to take care of our environment as we live near it. And just going further and further into it is actually degrading humanity. It might provide a short-term benefit, but long-term it hurts all of us. And so I'd urge Americans, especially those on the right, to reach out to their senators and to strike this provision. We have an opportunity to kill this. That doesn't mean we don't have to have conversations about affordability and the role of public lands in the West, but we have to kill this provision once and for all and then move on to a more productive conversation.
Well, Benji Backer, I appreciate you sharing your side of the argument with us. We'll see how it goes. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.